Hi, I'm Ellen from the Chili Dog. It's the final week of our funicular cowl knit along journey with my friends from Makers Mercantile. Today, we'll prepare to disembark by joining the two edges of the cowl together. I know that many people dread joining, especially in a situation like this, where we're joining a cast on edge to a side edge. But if we look for landmarks along the way, the process should be relatively quick and not overly difficult. Let's get started. Before I begin joining, I'm going to make sure I'm working with a good light on a flat, stable surface, not my lap. And I like to position the edges that are going to be joined with the right side of the fabric facing and the cast on edge above the side edge. And in this case, I'm using my cast on yarn tail to do the joining, and I'll be working from the right to the left. Whenever you're joining stitches to rows, it can be helpful to do a little math because in most cases, you'll have a different number of stitches across one edge and rows across the other edge. For this cowl, I've tried to make the math simple. There are 36 stitches across one edge and 48 rows across the other. Both of those numbers are divisible by 12, so I know that for every 3 stitches, there are going to be 4 rows. That means I'll need to skip every 4th row as I'm joining to make sure that things stay lined up. As I'm joining, I'll be looking for landmarks across each edge. On the cast on edge, I'll be working through that very first row of stitches. I'm looking for the V-shaped stitch that points towards the join. And as I join, my needle will always go from right to left under both legs of that V. On the side edge, I'm looking for a column of V-shaped stitches closest to the edge, and the tips of the V's all point towards the right. As I'm joining, my needle tip will go down through the center of one of those V-shaped stitches, under the tip of the next V, and then back up through the center of the next stitch. Since the row edge of things is in this dark yarn, and I know that it's a little bit hard to see on camera, I have just inserted some little ring stitch markers right through the center of these stitches, and hopefully that will make things a little bit easier to see and understand as I'm getting started. Right now, my yarn is on the stitch side of the join, so I'm going to actually start joining on the row side of the join. So I'll go down through the first stitch. I'm going to remove my stitch marker and get it out of the way. Open things up a little bit here, and then come back up through the next stitch and pull my yarn through. So that's one row. I'll join my first stitch, which is half contrasting color and half main color. One stitch. My next row, I'll go down where I previously came up. I'm going to remove that marker and then come up through the next stitch. It looks like I split my yarn there just a little bit. Come up through the next stitch. So that's row 2. Then we'll go under stitch 2. Down. Back up. Row 3. Stitch 3. And then I need to skip a row. So I'm just going to skip that next stitch. Down. And remove my marker. Back up. Row 1. Stitch 1. Row 2. Stitch 2. Row 3. Stitch 3. And then I'll skip a stitch and row 1. And I'd continue in that manner across. As you're joining, it's better to have things too loose than too tight because it's a lot easier to tighten things up at the end. Ultimately, you want your stitches in your join to be the same size as the stitches here that are worked in the main color. So I'm going to work a little bit farther across, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I've evened out some of the tension. I've worked about halfway across my joining here, and you can see things look a little sloppy. It's okay. I'm just going to use a spare needle here and tighten everything up. So I'll start at the beginning of the join and just leg by leg work across and tighten things up. Again, I don't need it to be super tight. I'm trying to get those stitches to be the same size as the main color stitches above them. I missed. So you can see, as I start taking out some of that extra slack, things start looking a whole lot neater. And comparatively, look at that compared to that. Tightening things up just neatens everything up. So I'm going to neaten up my tension across, and then I'll finish joining all the way across. Now that my join is complete and I've evened up my tension, it's time for us to weave in our final yarn tail and disembark. I hope you've enjoyed the Funicular Cowl knit along with my friends from Makers Mercantile just as much as I have. If you have any final questions as we wrap things up, or you want to share your finished project, and I certainly hope that you do because I can hardly wait to see it, head over to the Makers Mercantile group on Ravelry and look for the Funicular Cowl KAL discussion thread. Until we stitch again, happy knitting.